In this episode, we're talking about the trauma bond, which you've probably heard of many times if you've been in this narcissistic abuse space. And in this episode, I want to talk about how the trauma bond doesn't actually exist and why believing that it does is holding you back. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and former therapist with a background in counseling psychology. This podcast is for strong, high-achieving women who want more in their lives and relationships, who are ready to rise to the next level of growth, healing, and evolution. Nothing changes until you change. And when you change, everything else changes around you as a result. If you're done with feeling powerless within the chaotic and toxic dynamics in your relationship and don't even know where to begin with making changes, I've got you covered. I know you've tried everything, including counseling, watching hours of videos, and reading stacks of books on narcissism, and find that all it does is leave you feeling even more stuck and in the same place. None of these things work when you're living with a narcissistic spouse because the root causes of the symptoms are not being addressed. As with physical health, there is an emotional, physical, spiritual, and psychological component to healing and overcoming the problematic symptoms and pain you're facing every day in your life and relationship. If you're ready for a direct, no fluff, no nonsense approach to take you into your personal power and take back your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode. All right, so the buzz phrases that are in the narcissistic abuse community can be detrimental to our moving forward. I heard this in one of my Facebook groups that a lady in there was asking about how to break the trauma bond and go no contact. And as soon as you think about just, put yourself in this space of that you're in a trauma bond. You are in a trauma bond. You're trauma bonded. What does that bring up for you? So just sit with that for a minute. If you're kind of holding on to that label or that phrase of I'm trauma bonded, so I can't break free. What I have seen, and I know I've experienced this myself, is that when you attach to these phrases, it leaves you feeling powerless. Now, the trauma bond is not something that's in the diagnostic manual. I never learned a thing about it when I was in school to become a counselor because there is no such thing. It's a made-up term. And while there are real symptoms, I'm not going to say that there isn't something really deep that's going on in there. It actually has nothing to do with the other person. Okay, it has nothing to do with your partner or your ex. So if we can just throw away this trauma bond that's being thrown around everywhere, because what it's actually doing is it's keeping you attached to something that is external. It feels like it's something you have to battle in order to break free and be happy and no longer feel trapped, or you've left the relationship and you can't seem to let go and to go into no contact. So I see all of these different varying scenarios with women. It is good to realize that there is a very strong and toxic attachment to someone that is destroying you, that is destroying your life. But when we say we can't move forward because of the trauma bond, then we place our power externally on something as if we can't do anything about it. So when I asked you earlier about when you say, I'm trauma bonded or I can't leave because I'm trauma bonded, what does that bring up for you? How does it feel in your body? How does it make you feel emotionally? Like, what's the first thing that you feel? And whatever that feeling is one of your blocks, right? It's one of the blocks that you have to moving forward. So instead of talking, you've probably never heard me talk about the trauma bond. What I do talk about in my program is that we need to focus on our addictive personality, our tendencies to want to rescue. It becomes a rescue addiction. I've talked about this before. And the addictive patterns that you have that are keeping you frozen and unable to take a step forward. So any addiction is keeping you from feeling the feelings you don't want to feel with the relationship truly ending. And it distracts you from the work you need to be doing to be living your best life, to be taking care of yourself. And again, this comes up with women I've worked with that are still in the relationship feeling really stuck and unable to break free. But it also comes when you're in those first 3 months of leaving, that they have a really hard time sticking to the no contact. And if you have kids, I understand that that's not fully possible, but a lot of women there's a lot of things that they could be doing or stop doing that they're not. And so when they are still in contact with the ex, they are not able to move forward. You can't move forward when you're constantly, dipping your toe into your addictive tendencies. Just like if you had an alcohol addiction and you had just one shot, that's going to send you back into an addictive spiral and you're going to go on a bender probably, right? So this is why the no contact piece is very accurate. That needs to happen. And I understand that needs to sometimes happen in phases, and women that actually are doing that, they go through a really painful guilt for cutting off the other person, and also very painful withdrawal symptoms of actually like cutting that person off completely. So it does happen in phases, but what I'm really here to encourage you to do is be mindful of the labels and the phrases and the things that you tell yourself, the stories. I'm trauma bonded, therefore I can't leave is a story. I'm trauma bonded, so therefore I can't go no contact. That's a story. There are many ways that you can keep your contact with them very minimal, only necessary. And you just have a hard time doing it because, well, it's all you know. So you've got to break the patterns. So no contact is so that you can heal. So you can heal your nervous system. I've worked with women who are newly out of the relationship and they still feel like they're in it still. Their nervous system is still hijacked and in overdrive because they're not doing the things they need to do to detach from that and heal that and move away from that. They're still very much in that traumatized state, even though they've left. Because being around them can be really triggering, let's face it, especially in those early months after leaving. And women do end up getting very much guilt-tripped because these men are very good at framing themselves as the hurt victim that is so destroyed and distraught by your leaving. And so when you have contact with them, it stirs it all up and you feel this intense guilt, like you've done something wrong because they're not seeing or even willing to see their part in it. It's always ends up being you. You're the reason why it ended, right? So we have to be able to separate ourselves not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well. And I know this isn't easy, and I can tell you at the same time that it is possible, but not if you have continued contact. All right, so I talk more about these addictive personalities in ourselves when it comes to our own behaviors inside of my new membership, Reclaim You, formerly End the Cycle. This is a 12-month membership where you get access to my End the Cycle program and other new additions that I'll be adding to it. There is a quarterly live calls with me on Zoom, a private members only podcast, and a private members only Facebook group. So if you want to join us, you can head to the link in the show notes here and jump in, and you can get some support around how to actually do this. If you're thinking about leaving and you want to prepare yourself, or you have left and you're having a really hard time breaking free from that, then there is a community here to support you. All right, so that is it for this episode, and I will chat with you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of the Awakening Women podcast. If you love this episode, please take a moment to share it and leave a 5-star rating and review. If you're ready to take your next step, head to the link in the show notes to sign up for my latest free class. Also, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Awakening Women Official and join the conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again in the next episode. Take care of yourself in the meantime, and I'll see you online.